My beloved brothers and sisters, gather close this day. Let us talk about a place far away, yet deep in the soul of our shared ancestry. Let us talk about Burkina Faso, the land of the upright people. For too long, the northern Sahel has been described by outsiders as nothing more than a desert of silence, a place where the sun bleeds the color from the earth, and the endless, shifting sands swallow up hope, history, and humanity itself. We talk about isolation so profound that a mother's prayer could not carry her sick child to a doctor in time. We speak of communities cut off from the capital, Ouagadougou, not by a river, but by decades of neglect and the harsh, unforgiving hand of geography. But hear me now, when despair reigns supreme, a visionary will always rise. A young man, a soldier, a captain, a man named Ibrahim Traoré, stepped forward. He did not offer soft words or gentle promises. No, he offered a defiant challenge to the desert itself. He declared the Desert Highway Project. 420 kilometers of asphalt, concrete, and sheer undiluted will slicing through the heart of the barren land. A staggering investment of nearly $280 million. He calls this road not just infrastructure, but a path to dignity, a path to survival. The question before us, my friends, is not just about dollars and asphalt. It's about the spirit. Can one nation's defiant dream truly pave a road to redemption? Or is this bold undertaking a gamble that risks swallowing the last vestiges of hope? Stay with us. We are about to walk this dusty road together, from the dust of the announcement to the climax of the construction and beyond. If you believe that the story of African self-determination, the story of our people rising against all odds, deserves to be told with truth and gravity, then I ask you right now to hit that subscribe button and join our fellowship of truth seekers. Don't just watch the headlines. Understand the heartbeat beneath the asphalt. Hark, my brethren! The word came forth from Ouagadougou, the nation's beating heart, yet for too many years it felt like a distant, self-absorbed pulse. Think of the irony, a nation called the land of the upright people, yet its children were bent low by hunger, by isolation, and by the constant, corrosive threat of the extremist. The Sahel region, the vast northern expanse, was a wound that refused to heal. It was a place where a farmer's bounty rotted in the heat because there was no road, no path to market. Then there was the moment, the day when President Traoré stood before the people not just as a figure of authority, but as a man burdened by the collective suffering. He didn't speak in the cautious, measured tones of a seasoned politician. No, he spoke with the fire of a prophet, announcing a covenant. He declared the Desert Highway Project, a testament of faith, not a feasibility study. He laid out the vision, 420 kilometers, linking the capital to Dori and pushing onward towards the borders of Niger and Mali. This region has long suffered, forgotten by those in power and tormented by those who seek to sow chaos. 420 kilometers. Do you understand the magnitude of that undertaking, beloved? It is the defiant geometry of hope. It is a straight line drawn across the crookedness of decades. Engineers explained that this project would require advanced techniques just to resist the eternal enemy, the shifting sand. It would require constant, tireless maintenance to prevent collapse. But it would also generate an estimated 25,000 direct and indirect jobs during its construction phase alone. A true chance for honest labor. The investment? $280 million. Stop and consider that figure. For a nation that struggles, whose budget is stretched thin as worn linen, that sum is not just a budget line. It is a spiritual offering. It is the nation taking its last precious gold and casting it into the furnace, praying for a shield and a sword. The people rejoiced, not the elites, not the politicians, but the ordinary folk, the young workers who for the first time saw a purpose beyond idleness. They saw the chance to earn, to sweat, for a wage that was honest. The market women, their faces etched with the memory of long, dangerous treks, imagined trucks, carrying their goods swiftly, safely. And the mothers, oh, the mothers. They saw that asphalt as a lifeline, a denial of the desert's power to snatch away their children. In their eyes, Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just a distant soldier leader. He was becoming the builder of national destiny. This, my friends, is the genesis of the dream, a desperate, necessary act of audacity. It is the declaration that we will no longer wait for the hand of foreign powers to rescue us. We will pick up the shovel ourselves, and we will carve our future out of the sand. But hear the whispers. Even as the sun warmed the cheering crowds, the shadow of doubt fell heavy. The intellectuals in Ouagadougou, the skeptics, the policy analysts, they raised their voices, thin and sharp like a desert wind. "Where will the money come from?" they cried. They warned that desert road projects are often financial sinkholes, costs doubling, even tripling, until they become a debt burden that suffocates future generations. They questioned the very priority. Why a highway, President Traoré? Why not food security? Why not immediately fix the failing healthcare system? To them, this was a magnificent distraction, a symbolic legacy built on shaky financial ground. So, here is the dilemma, laid bare before the Lord. On one side, the passionate, guttural cry of the people for dignity and connection. On the other, the cold, hard arithmetic of the economists and the chilling history of nations drowning in debt. Was this announcement a foolish vanity, or was it the necessary catalyst, the spark that a generation needed to believe in its own power? We must ask ourselves, when the house is burning, is the biggest risk in acting boldly or in waiting cautiously until the fire consumes everything? The road was declared, the funds were earmarked, and the nation held its breath. But the biggest challenge was not the shifting sand, beloved. The biggest challenge was the shifting political ground, where an old, violent enemy lay waiting to challenge the very foundation of this new dream. Praise God! The bulldozers rolled. The promise became physical. When those massive steel machines began to bite into the silent, unforgiving desert sand, a collective gasp of breath went out across the nation. For the people of the North, it was more than the breaking of ground. It was the breaking of a curse. They watched the surveyors, the engineers, the men in hard hats, and in their hearts they knew, the state has returned. The government remembers us. The government framed the groundbreaking ceremony as a historic turning point. Ibrahim Traoré declared that each meter of asphalt laid would be a victory against despair, an act of defiance against the forces of violence that had long held the Sahel hostage. That declaration created a powerful climax in the national narrative, because for many citizens, the construction of the highway symbolized more than a road. It symbolized a fight for survival and sovereignty. But hear the word of the Lord. No dream of dignity is ever born without a fight. The moment that first stretch of asphalt was poured, the ancient enemy, the forces of division and darkness, rose up to challenge the light. The armed groups, those merchants of violence who had held the Sahel hostage for far too long, issued their wicked threats. They declared with cold, murderous certainty that they would not allow a government road to cut through their territories. They threatened sabotage. They promised bloodshed. They sought to turn hope into a graveyard. This, my brothers and sisters, was the climax. This was the moment of truth for Captain Traoré. What was the response of the young leader? Did he hesitate? Did he retreat to the capital? No. He looked upon the threat of the enemy and did what a true shepherd must do. He raised his staff and defended his flock. President Traoré gave the command. Military units were ordered to secure the construction zones. Suddenly, the desert highway was not just an infrastructure project. It became a front line. It was a civilian dream protected by the steel resolve of the nation's soldiers. Young men, barely out of their teens, stood guard under the blazing, merciless sun. Their rifles trained, their eyes watching for the shadow of danger, all to protect the dignity of the asphalt being laid down. This intertwining of national defense with national development captured the world's attention. International journalists reported images of young soldiers guarding bulldozers, framing the project as a battle of wills between a nation striving for progress and insurgents determined to keep it in darkness. Think of the young men and women who volunteered for the labor brigades. They knew the danger. They knew that by stepping onto that construction site, they were placing themselves in the direct line of fire. They were facing not just the heat and the grueling labor, but the real possibility of death. Yet they showed up. Why? Because they declared, in a profound, guttural voice that resonated across the continent, that they preferred to risk their lives building something meaningful than to remain idle in unemployment and despair. That, my friends, is the definition of courage. That is the spirit that lifts nations. This raw, stubborn determination was a sermon preached without words. Leaders in neighboring Mali and Niger watched, knowing that the outcome of this struggle would define not just Burkina Faso, but the future of the entire Sahel region. Was this a dangerous precedent of putting civilians in harm's way? Perhaps. But for the thousands lining up for work, it was simply their chance to reclaim their future, one shovelful of sand at a time. And then came the payoff, the emotional release, the inaugural moment of the first 50 kilometers completed. I tell you, when the villagers lined that fresh black asphalt, some of them weeping openly, touching the new road as if it were a sacred thing, the spiritual weight of the project became undeniable. They called it the Road of Hope. This was the triumph of the soul over the sand. Yet, even in that joy, a new worry began to stir. The eyes of the global powers were now fixed upon this battle line. They wondered, could this fragile nation sustain the dual cost of building the road and protecting it? Could they win the battle against the terrorists without losing the war against debt and global influence? The journey has begun, beloved, but the steepest climb lies ahead. Now, let us settle our spirits and reflect on the consequences. The road is being laid, centimeter by sacred centimeter. But what does this asphalt truly mean for the souls who live along its path? The immediate change, my friends, was nothing short of miraculous. Imagine a mother holding a feverish child who can now reach the clinic in hours, not days. That highway is not just infrastructure, it is a lifeline. It is the answer to generations of prayers. Food prices began to drop because goods could flow from the fertile fields to the remote villages. Small businesses blossomed where silence once reigned, markets springing up to serve the travelers and the construction crews. The young men and women who had left for the despair of the capital began to return, drawn by a magnetic new opportunity. This is the fruit of self-sacrifice. This is the dignity that comes from refusing to be defined by your limitations. This project is a clear, ringing testament to African self-determination. It is the fierce declaration that we, the people of the continent, are capable of solving our own fundamental problems of isolation and poverty. We will chart our own course. We will build our own future. However, beloved, where there is great light, there is always a shadow. The road brought prosperity, but it also brought complexity and division. Suddenly, isolated villages had to contend with an influx of outsiders, traders, travelers, opportunists. This rapid change strained traditional ways of life, leading to tensions over resources and cultural identity. The peace was fragile, and the price of protecting that asphalt was astronomical, requiring Captain Traoré to keep military units permanently stationed along the route, constantly reminding the nation that development and conflict were locked in a dangerous dance. Then the whispers became accusations. Corruption, the old, ugly demon that seeks to feast on the people's sacrifice. Watchdog organizations began to question the contracts, raising suspicions that the very elites who cheered the loudest were also secretly enriching themselves. These allegations intensified political divisions. The political division deepened. For some, the highway remained a unifying symbol of national pride. For others, it became a ticking financial bomb, a glorious spectacle masking systemic graft. The opposition parties, sharp-tongued and worried, highlighted the crushing financial reality. They pointed out, quite correctly, that desert roads are insatiable in their demand for maintenance. The promised $280 million, they warned, could balloon to $400 million or more before completion. This project, they argued, was a massive weight of debt being placed on the shoulders of generations yet unborn. The question became heavy. Is the dignity of a highway worth the chains of financial servitude? Yet, despite the debt, despite the danger, the most profound effect was psychological. For the first time in decades, citizens across Burkina Faso spoke with renewed pride. They told their children, "The desert no longer defines our fate." This spiritual awakening, this belief in their own power to defy geography and history, energized the youth, inspired songs, and gave people the courage to persevere through hardship. The road became the stage for a grand drama, a test of the nation's integrity and its collective will. My brothers and sisters, what say you? When a project brings life-saving access and ignites national pride, yet simultaneously risks financial ruin and political corruption, how should the people judge their leader? Can the promise of African self-determination survive the reality of high costs and human greed? Let us lift our eyes now from the dust of the Sahel and look to the high towers of global power, to Washington, to Brussels, to Moscow, and to Beijing. For the truth, beloved, is that no matter how local a project of destiny may seem, the world is always watching, the world is always calculating. In Washington, D.C., the Desert Highway Project is not seen through the eyes of a hopeful mother or a working farmer. No, it is viewed through the cold, hard lens of geopolitical strategy. Analysts at think tanks debate, not the dignity of the people, but the risk to the Sahel's security. They ask, will this road stabilize the region by boosting commerce and employment? Or will the crushing debt and the military presence further destabilize an already fragile state? But beneath this debate lies the deeper, more urgent question for the West: influence. For decades, the West, and particularly the United States, has viewed the Sahel as a theater for counter-terrorism. Now, as Captain Traoré dares to build a road of defiance, he is simultaneously seeking partners beyond the usual Western framework. When Russia and China quickly offered financial backing and equipment, it sent shivers down the spine of Western policymakers. They worry that Traoré's gamble, born of a genuine need for development, might simply open the door for rival powers to expand their influence, placing the financial future of Burkina Faso in a new form of servitude. This dynamic should resonate with us, my brothers and sisters. It echoes our own history, the constant tension between seeking self-sufficiency and resisting the strings attached to foreign aid. It reminds us of the great infrastructure projects in our own history, the Hoover Dam, the interstate highway system, which were symbols of national ambition during hard times, yet came with their own economic and social costs. In Europe, the reaction is cautious, bordering on suspicious. They welcome the development, yes, but they whisper warnings about transparency and the history of large African infrastructure projects collapsing under mismanagement and corruption. For them, it is a dangerous precedent, a fragile nation risking everything on a giant, flashy endeavor. Yet, turn your gaze to African news and the neighboring states of Mali and Niger. There, the view is admiration. They see the desert highway not as a risk, but as a model. They see the bold, defiant face of a young leader refusing to bow to the perceived wisdom of Western caution. They see a project that elevates the entire continent's vision for regional integration and trade. The question for us, the people of the diaspora, is how to interpret this complex struggle. Should we align with the Western analysts who warn of financial peril? Or should we stand with the African people who see a chance, a necessary chance, to seize control of their own destiny? The challenge is to hold both truths, the hope of the worker and the shadow of the debt. Because this road is not just an African story, it is a global battleground for the soul and sovereignty of the developing world. Hallelujah! We have journeyed through the dust of the announcement, the fire of the construction, and the shadows of the consequences. We now stand at the precipice, looking down the long, black ribbon of asphalt that cuts across the desert. This highway, my friends, is more than a road. It is a metaphor made real. It is the absolute, undeniable commitment of one nation to challenge the ancient decree of its geography. It is the statement that the desert does not own our future. We do. It represents the ultimate triumph of the will over despair. But let us be sober. The construction is only half the battle. The road ahead remains uncertain and fragile. The enemies of progress, the terrorists, the corrupt officials, the gnawing debt, they have not vanished. They are simply waiting for the first sign of weakness. For the dream to become reality, Burkina Faso must now navigate the treacherous waters of international finance without surrendering its sovereignty, and it must maintain constant vigilance against those who would destroy the hope it has built. And this brings us to the core of the matter. Traoré's legacy. Will the history books look back on President Traoré and remember him as a visionary builder, a modern-day Thomas Sankara who dared to dream of a self-reliant Africa, carving opportunity out of sand and stone? Will he be celebrated as the man who brought dignity back to the Sahel? Or will he be remembered as the cautionary tale, the ambitious young leader whose reach exceeded his nation's financial grasp, drowning his people in debt and allowing foreign powers to exploit his heroic effort? That question, beloved, is still being answered by every meter of asphalt, every dollar spent, and every contract awarded. The world watches, but the future of the nation rests on the fortitude of the Burkinabe people. The ultimate measure of Traoré's legacy will not be the money spent, but the spirit preserved. It will be the number of lives saved, the number of young people who find dignified work, and the depth of the national pride that remains long after the construction dust settles. This road must become more than just a path for commerce. It must become a path for national transformation and enduring spiritual independence. The world watches, yes, but the people of Burkina Faso hold the final judgment. They must decide if this highway is truly their path to hope, or if they must look elsewhere to find the leadership and the vision to carry them forward. The struggle is not over. It has merely changed its address. So we come to the end of this profound meditation, my beloved. We have seen the desperate silence of the desert, and we have witnessed the defiant roar of a nation determined to build its own destiny. The story of Burkina Faso's desert highway is not simple, for truth is never simple. It is a terrifying dance between the sublime vision of African self-determination and the brutal reality of debt, danger, and division. The road stretches before us, 420 kilometers of hope, but the journey is far from over. Will this project, born of necessity and courage, withstand the twin pressures of financial exhaustion and external interference? Will President Traoré prove to be the nation builder who delivered his people from isolation? Or will the weight of the Traoré's legacy become too heavy for the upright people to bear? We must not look away, my friends. This story is an urgent mirror held up to the entire continent. It reminds us that every step toward sovereignty, every claim to dignity, demands a monumental sacrifice. It demands that we confront the corruption within and resist the external powers who would turn our aspirations into their economic gain. The spirit of African self-determination must be fierce enough to conquer both the shifting sands and the shifting political loyalty. This highway is a prayer written in asphalt. It is a vow that the children of the Sahel will never again be forgotten. It is the final, undeniable proof that the African spirit, when pushed to the limit, will choose building over bombing and future over fear. I ask you now to reflect. Think about the mothers, the workers, and the soldiers standing guard under that fierce sun. Do you believe that their profound sacrifice is enough to secure the future they are paving toward? And how do we, the children of the diaspora, support the enduring spirit of African self-determination so that Traoré's legacy becomes one of triumph, not tragedy? Lift your voice in the comments below. Tell us if you believe this is a noble risk worth taking. And if you have been moved by this truth, if you recognize the importance of Africa claiming its destiny, then honor this story by subscribing. Join this movement of awareness and help us shine a light on the bold, beautiful, and complicated journey of a continent rising.